Hi guys, John from P&P Campers. I'm just going to do your handover video on your Tio R. So it's based on the 3 litre Fiat Ducato chassis, 3 litre because it's got the 160 multi-jet engine. So if we start under the bonnet, we've got the paint code on the left hand side here, which is 611, and the chassis plate with 300 kilo gross weight. On the left hand side, well, I will just explain, this here is just a cover to stop water going on top of the engine basically. So, you know, some people do this just to stop any sort of rust forming on top of the engine. So on the left hand side, we've got your washer fluid, power steering fluid and engine coolant, the brake fluid, engine oil filling point and the engine oil dipstick. So that's all just over there on that one left hand side. On the right, we've got the positive terminal for your engine battery, just there, under this little cover. And your earth, or your negative point, is this one just here. So the actual engine battery itself sits under the floor in the cab on these chassis, just down here under this cover. And so that's why you've got a jump starting point under the bonnet. On the near side, we've got your diesel filling point just there. Just at the back here, we've got the rear door. Instead of having the proper original rear doors, they IH have made these kind of openings here, so you get a huge amount of storage down this left hand side, which, by the way, your carpets are in here and your trip switch is just down there, which you can get to from inside under the seat. The jack and wheel brace, which would normally have been under the front seats, is just there as well. And you've also got your gas locker in here. So you've got, at the moment, a new 6 kilo propane bottle. To turn these bottles on, you go anti-clockwise round to the left, so that turns it on, and clockwise round to the right turns it off. The bottle's secure at the moment, and all you need to know is that you have to turn this off before you start driving, and that is about it really. On the off side, you've got your boiler vent just here and your hookup point. So once you've got the hookup plugged in, it'll give you access to anything that works on the mains power, so anything household sort of thing will work from that. The wastewater drain off point is this one just here. Toilet cassette locker is this one. So you've got your flush fluid that gets topped up through this reservoir here at the top, and your flush fluid reservoir here. The cassette toilet itself, you lift up on the little green handle here and lift it out, which I'm supposed to make look easy, but I've only got one hand to do it. Right, let me just push that back in. Okay, so once you've got that out, you've got the bench seat style cassette there, which is the biggest style. Once you've got that out, all you need to know really is that you need to keep on top of lubricating this rubber seal just here with some kind of silicone lubricant, if you can do that. You empty it out from here, and when you're actually physically emptying it, you should be holding down the little green button there at the back. Put it all the way back in, just like that. Then got your 2 fridge vents just here. So if you had the fridge lit up on gas, you'd be able to feel hot air coming out through this top right hand side. And your freshwater inlet point just there with the cap to go on that. So there you go. So I will just jump in the van now. I will just make sure that we haven't... Oh, there you go. Freshwater drain off. It's just there. It was hiding behind the sliding door. So that's where you drain out your fresh water from, if you should ever need to do that. Okay. So I'm just going to shut this door 1 second. And I'm going to put up some skylights because it's pretty warm in here. Okay, so whilst I'm doing this, I'll just show you how it works. So these skylights are super easy. Push this little button in and turn the handle, both sides. and then pull this bar down and push up. That will then hold up by itself, and that is how you use that window there. So first things first, the cab is pretty straightforward, to be fair. So you've got this 6-speed manual gearbox, reversing camera over on the right hand side of the steering wheel just there. You can lock and unlock the cab from inside just there next to the hazard light switch. Your standard original fitted stereo system there, singled in. Yeah, so it's all pretty straightforward, to be fair, on this one. Not a huge amount to sort of go through. The bonnet release handle is just inside. When you open up the passenger door here, it's just inside there, just so that you know that. On the passenger side. Okay. The windows in the vehicle all work in a very similar way as well. So push these little buttons in. And the reason it's so important to push the buttons in is because if you don't push this button in here and just try and lift this up, you will break it if you open it. And that's it. They work on a latch system. So there you go. Right, so as soon as you walk in front of you, you've got your control panel up here. So it's a CBE control panel. CBE do control panels for most of the sort of high-end brands. You know, Concord use them, Cartago use them, and obviously i8 use them. So straight away, on the left-hand side here, once you've turned it on with the on switch, obviously, you've got internal temperature and external temperature. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's right. It is very warm in here because it's a well insulated vehicle. So you've got just below that one, we've got this one here, which is your battery voltage. So that's your leisure battery voltage and the vehicle battery voltage. Now obviously the leisure battery, as you know, has been replaced for a nice lithium battery, which is just down there. So that's all done. That's why these little bits here have got these two vents on them. So the lithium battery has been fitted and that is in there, and that's why you're sat at 12.6 volts. All the lights are on in the vehicle, the water pump is switched on. So, you know, for a leisure battery that's actually having current drawn from it, 12.7 is very, very good. So just sort of shows the lithium battery working as it should do. So that's those three on the left hand. Oh, sorry, and the bottom one here is your freshwater level. If I'm honest with you, I don't think that's quite right, because I think the freshwater tank is actually full. So we might need to put some cleaner in the actual tank just to clean off the prongs, but they are, to be honest with you, the level indicators there are just a bit of a guide, really. When you fill the tank up, you'll know it's full because it will start overflowing out the top. So that's the sort of more realistic way to look at it. But anyway, I'll have a look and see if we can find a reason for why that's not doing its job properly. On and off switch up there on the top right, you've got lights, auxiliary power. So the auxiliary power might do things like the ignition for the hob and the light in the oven. Auxiliary power might also do any aftermarket fitments, which I don't think there are any. And also TV aerial boosters and things like that. So the booster is up here. So there that goes to. Anyway, that's what that little switch there does. So yeah, so lights, auxiliary power, and your water pump switch. When your water pump switch is on, we'll go through the bits in there in just a minute. As soon as you put the water pump switch on, you might find, because it's a pressurizing pump, you might find that it will run for a minute and turn itself off. As long as that tap, or the pump, sorry, turns itself off, you can know that the whole system is up to pressure, and that you've got, you know, the boiler's full and all that sort of stuff. If you turn the pump on and it runs on and doesn't actually turn itself off, then you can be pretty certain that something's either leaking or not quite full yet. So reasons for that could be that you've not got enough water in the fresh tank. If there isn't enough water in the fresh tank, then the pump will just run on and you won't get any water coming through the tap. If there's a leak somewhere, the pump will purge itself. So it will kind of come on and turn off, come on, turn off. So that's a kind of good indicator that there's a leak somewhere. Now, at the moment, the water pump switch is switched on and it's not running at all. It's completely dead silent, which means that we're up to pressure and that there's no leaks anywhere. Basically, the water pump sits just down there. It looks like a reasonably new one to me. I'll go through that stuff with you in just a minute though. So the first thing you want to do, if you want to use the heating and the hot water and all that sort of stuff, turn your water pump switch on, assuming that you've got some water in the tank, and just come to the tap here. Lift the tap up on the cold side first. So the pump is really, really quiet, but it is running. Now turn it to the left for the hot. Just undo that. Now I can see for a fact that there is pressure at both sides, hot and cold, and that tells me that the boiler is full up, and also that there's no air in the system for the hot side. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can go ahead and I can use the boiler however I want to, because I know it's full of water. If I had done that just there and no water came out of there at all, I can be pretty certain that the boiler's got no water in it, and so you shouldn't really be using it at all. All right, especially for hot water, because if there's no water in it, then you're just going to overheat the boiler. So that's a really important thing to remember. Just double check that just by lifting up the tap, hot and cold. Make sure there's water coming through the tap. If there's not, just see if there's, see if the boiler drains down, all that sort of stuff. Okay, but that's that. That's really, really easy stuff. Just do that once, when you get in the vehicle. Just make sure you've got pressure. Next to this, we've got the cooker. Now the cooker is pretty simple. You've got a 4-burner hob at the top, and obviously you've got your oven and grill at the bottom as well. But the ignition for all 4 burners, the grill and the oven, is this one switch here. So this is actually all one unit. So this is all one thing. All right. So the ignition for all of it is that one there. Switch there is for the light in the oven. Push in around to the right for the grill, and push in around to the left for the oven. Obviously whilst using the ignition switch there, but that is it really, nice and easy. Nice big deep drawer down here underneath that as well, which is always, I think IH are sort of my favourite brand for kind of the small motor. They always make the small motorhomes, but there's just so much storage in them, which is just like, you can't even get your head around it a lot of the time, like how they fit it all in. But anyway, so I feel like I'm kind of doing this in a bit of a random order, but I'm just trying to make sure I don't forget anything. So yeah, that's the cooker system there, nice and easy, just on the one ignition system. And as I say, you obviously have to make sure your gas is switched on in the cupboard there, because it is all gas. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. The fridge is a little bit more complex. It's not complicated. Once you've used one of these, a few times, it's super easy to use it, but a little bit more complex in the way that they actually work. So this is a 3-way fridge. Dometic is pretty much the biggest supplier and maker of the fridges. So essentially what it means is you have to work out which way you can use the fridge at any one time. At the moment, I don't have the engine running, so I can't use this 12-volt one. I don't have the electric hookup plugged in, so I can't use this 240-volt switch, but I do have the gas switched on. So the only way I can use the fridge at the moment is the gas. It would work the exact same way as if I didn't have the gas on, but I did have the hookup plugged in. I could use this one here. If I didn't have either of those top two, but I did have the engine running, I would go down to 12-volt. But because at the moment I've only got the gas on, what I have to do is just turn this once to the right, and it will light straight up. So I don't know if you heard that on the video, but basically when you turn it to the gas symbol there, the ignition starts on the back by itself, it lights up by itself, and the ignition turns off by itself. So you literally haven't got to do anything at all apart from select gas. Now once that's on and it's working like it is at the moment, because you've got the little amber light in there that's telling us it's working, that will take a good 2, maybe even 3 hours to actually get cold. All right, so if you imagine, a lot of people are shocked by that, but if you think, if you got a new fridge at home and plugged it in for the first time, it's not going to be cold within 10 minutes. It will take a good 3 or 4 hours to get cold. And it's the same, because these fridges aren't on all the time in the motorhomes. In fact, they're very rarely on. only when you go away on holiday, they have to get cold from hot, if that makes sense. So, you know, they do take a little while to get cold. So try to be sort of as patient as you can with them. They do take a little while, but once they are cold, they don't use a huge amount of gas to stay cold, if that makes sense. Same as if you had the electric hookup plugged in and you were down there on the 240, it might take a good 2 or 3 hours to get cold still, but once it is actually cold, it won't be using a huge amount of power. Okay, so that's how you use those top two. The third one down, the 12 volt, is a little bit more complex in the sense that you can't use the 12 volt to get the fridge cold. So if you imagine this fridge right now, this fridge is not cold at all. I haven't had it on whatsoever. If I start the engine up and turn over to 12 volt, I cannot expect the fridge to actually get cold. Okay, all that the 12 volt, well, it'll get a bit cold, but not really. All that the 12 volt does is keep the fridge cold whilst you're driving. So before you head off, what you need to do, you need to either get the fridge cold via the gas or the 240 volt. In my opinion, my sort of tip to you, if you like, you don't have to do it, but my tip would be to, if you were going to go on holiday tomorrow morning, for example, I would plug the van in on the hookup the night before you go, and then switch over to the mains here for the fridge, so that all night long before you leave, the battery's getting a real good charging up from the charger because of the hookup, and your fridge is on the mains getting cold, so that by the morning all you have to do is undo the hookup, put the hookup in the van somewhere, switch over to 12 volt here, start the engine up and go. And by doing that, turning over to 12 volt when you start the engine up, it just initiates the 12 volt element in the back of this fridge and keeps it cold whilst you're driving. Once you get to wherever you're going, you will have to switch back to one of the other two again, but that, that's just how they work. It's nice and easy. So yeah, that's hopefully that makes sense. On that same sort of point, the way that the 12 volt element gets its power, just in case you weren't aware, all motorhomes have got what's called, well, not all motorhomes, but all decent branded motorhomes have got what's called a split charger or a split relay. So what a split relay does is, if you imagine, let's use this as an example, if this is the alternator and this is the engine battery here, if you imagine the engine's running, the alternator here is creating power via the engine and sending power to the engine battery to keep it powered up whilst you drive. That's the same with every car, every van in the world pretty much. With a motorhome, between here and here, between the alternator and the engine battery, you've got another set of wires that come off here and split across to the leisure battery, which is down there, and the fridge. So that all the time your engine's running, the alternator itself, or the engine itself, is charging up the engine battery, the leisure battery, and sending power to the fridge. So that you can do all of that whilst your engine's running, your leisure battery's getting a good charge up, and you can keep the fridge cold. So that is how that works, just in case you were wondering. Under the sink here, what have we got? So we've got, obviously don't worry, it's not been valeted just yet. So you've got down here your gas isolators. All right, so if you want to isolate the gas from any specific appliances, you can do that from here. So turning them, where the white one was just a minute ago, where it was like facing top to bottom, that is basically off. And so any gas going to whatever appliance that corresponds to will have no gas going to it. All right. Under the sink, you can see your hot and cold feeds just there, and the waste drain off point. Shut these up. Okay, let's do the bathroom next. So the bathroom is nice and simple, not much to it at all. You've got the shower point just there. So the shower tap itself has got a little button on it, which you have to press that in for the water to actually come out. The toilet, super simple. Press this blue button in to get the flush fluid pumping around, and then pull this handle towards you to drain it out into the cassette. You do need to make sure that you push this flap back away again. And that's it, that's how you use the toilet. Sink, just as easy as all the other bits. Cold to the right, hot to the left. You will notice that there's no drain in the actual sink here. Lift up and pour down the back. So the reason that works is because there's kind of two little drains just here and here, and it basically just drains down into the waste tank from them. You've got a nice little bit of storage up here as well, just, you know, like your average kind of like medicine cabinet kind of thing. Must be a switch, a little handle for that or something. Right, so that's the bathroom. Okay, so in the back just here, you've got your 240 volt switch and the gas dial for the boiler. Before I show you how those buttons work, I will just run you through these bits down here. So this box just here is the actual physical boiler, so you don't actually have to do anything with that, but you've got in fact you should specifically not do anything with this really, but you've got this cover just here, so I've just basically taken this off so you can see. Go the right way around. This cover just here actually physically covers the boiler up really nicely, but you've got just down here next to the boiler the more important cupboard, which there is also a cover for, which I just lifted up for the time being. But as I said, you've got your nice new looking pump just there. I wouldn't be surprised if we've replaced that because it does look very, very new. So that's your new pump, and then to the right of the pump there you've got this little yellow dial. So the little yellow dial, or the button, lift that up and whatever water is inside the boiler will drain out onto the floor. Okay, so that's your boiler drain off point. So the only reason you should ever need to do that is if you were going to come up to winter, for example, and you thought the water inside the boiler was going to get to the sort of freezing temperatures and that it might freeze. If you don't do that and the boiler does freeze up with all the water inside of it, essentially what will happen is all the little pipes and places that the water is pressurized inside the boiler with will freeze, and then obviously when water freezes it expands and you'll start to get leaks all over the place because all the little pipes will crack. Normally these little sort of connectors here, these little elbow pieces all over the place, they'll be the places that crack. So it's just good practice. Make sure that you drain the boiler out once you're sort of getting towards winter, if you're not going to be using the vehicle. If you're going to be using the vehicle, it's not really a problem because, you know, the van will be at a decent temperature all the time anyway. But if you're going to leave it in storage over winter, you need to make sure you drain that out. So you can put this cover back on. There you go. That's back on just down there. So once that's back down, you can put this seat back on. Okay, so that's where the boiler drain off is, and the pump, if you should ever need to get to that. You probably won't need to get to the pump for any reason, but the boiler drain is always important to know where it is. So these dials here are very important. So you've got this one just here, which is your thermostat. So that's not a button, it's just a thermostat. And that's a thermostat for the boiler's heating system. So when you turn the heating on, it essentially just uses that thermostat there to decide what temperature to stop at and when to kick back in. So that is how that works. So it is a 240 volt electric one here as well. The 240 volt switch here, which obviously won't do anything because the hookup's not plugged in at the moment, is for the water only, the hot water only. Okay, so the heating on the vehicle is gas only, but the boiler or the hot water part side of things you can either do on the mains by using this switch here, or going up on this dial here to use it on the gas. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So for example, if we just clear this bottom one up first, if I wanted to get the hot water, if I wanted to use the hot water, going around in circles. If I wanted to heat the water up that's inside the boiler via the electric element or via the electric hookup, I would turn this button on here and just wait half an hour or so to get my hot water. If I didn't have the electric plugged in, and I did have the gas, for the hot water, I would go up 1 or 2 for either 40 or 60 degrees. Okay. For the heating, you use the top dial and go down 1, and that gives you heating only. And if you want heating and hot water, you go down 2 for heating and hot water at 60. So that is that. So as I said, the top dial here is all just for gas things. The bottom dial, or the bottom switch, is for the hot water on electric. So you've got the TV there, Avtex TV. You know, I've got no reason to think that that doesn't work. We don't tend to test them as part of the habitation check, because it's not actually a habitation check kind of, you know, requirement to test that. It's not anything to do with it. Yeah, I've got no reason to think that doesn't work. The storage underneath the back there is obviously underneath this rear seat here. And as I was saying, on the outside, you can get to your trip switch cover just by lifting this up, basically. It's just there. But yeah, otherwise it's just, you know, absolutely tons of storage. Rear speakers here in each corner, which is always nice as well. Loads of lights around the vehicle, so you know, you're not going to get short of lights. Most of the lights have been replaced for LEDs as well, so there's a nice LED bulb there, nice and bright. But yeah, so I mean, I don't think there's much else I can show you really. If there is, and you think there's anything I've missed out specifically, just let us know, and I'll go through anything you need. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you soon to collect your van. Thanks very much.